Day 12 in the bubble. 68 have become 16. This is only temporary, but the NCAA tournament, that's forever. This is Stuffed.
This is March. Chicken vodka wrap is to die for.
Welcome to Stuff with Jon Rothstein. Best player you don't know in college basketball.
We have a very high bar on this show. I've let myself go, I'll be 400 pounds. I just want to make sure I don't go all in on chocolate chip pancakes at the diner down the street.
Forget about not sleeping until May. I may not sleep at all, but I wouldn't trade it for anything else. College hoops. Everything else is just secondary.
Who's ready to nosh? Welcome to Stuffed with Jon Rothstein. I'm coming to you live from the Indianapolis bubble. Day 12 for me, 2 weeks left. A little casual today, no jacket, just here in my button-down shirt, waiting for a nice Grubhub order for lunch. I've gotten really into Cobb salads. I found 3 good places here in Indianapolis that can all deliver. And as a matter of fact, despite the fact that I haven't been able to exercise, because again, I am the only one that is allowed of the media to be in this controlled environment, I feel like I'm losing weight, and I'm really excited about that. You want to know why? Because I've got a reservation April 7th at Lilia in Brooklyn for the cheat meal of all cheat meals. Never been to Lilia? You want to get on Resi right now and try and make a reservation. One of the best cacio pepis in the city. The pesto is tremendous, as well as the red sauce. But what about the NCAA tournament? This is what you need to know. I have said time and time again that this is the year of the outlier in college basketball. So would any of those outliers take advantage of that? Let's find out now in a New York Minute. A big weekend for the Pac-12. 80% of the teams from the Pac-12 that made the NCAA tournament are in the Sweet 16. USC, Oregon, Oregon State, and also UCLA. Not a great weekend for the Big 10 or the Big 12. All season long, we have seen these two programs as the ones that have separated from the rest of the sport. Right now, the Big 12 and the Big 10 have sent 16 teams to the NCAA tournament. As of now, just 2, Michigan and Baylor, will play this weekend in the Sweet 16. And let's be honest right now. All season long, Gonzaga and Baylor have looked like the 2 best teams in college basketball. And if you look at the view from 30,000 feet out, it almost feels like a higher power are putting these 2 programs in position to play for a national championship. Now let's take a deep dive into the bracket, see what happened, obviously, over the weekend. We're going to start in the top left of your bracket, which I have renamed affectionately the Gonzaga Invitational. Gonzaga made mincemeat out of its first 2 opponents, beat Oklahoma in convincing fashion in the round of 32. And it makes you ask yourself right now, can anybody come close to Gonzaga when the Bulldogs are at their ceiling? Right now, it doesn't seem like a realistic situation. Creighton will be the next opponent or victim for Gonzaga in the Sweet 16. A really good matchup on paper. Creighton got by Santa Barbara and Ohio in its first 2 games, and I want to point this out as well. It's amazing to me, year after year, decade after decade, that the one thing that we all need to remember is that the NCAA tournament and advancing in the NCAA tournament all normally comes down to 1 or 2 plays. And Creighton is a perfect example. Santa Barbara, a trendy pick as a 12 seed, had Creighton on its heels for the majority of its game in the round of 64. Santa Barbara doesn't get a defensive rebound. A questionable call is called on the Gauchos. Creighton goes to the line, makes a couple of free throws. And then on the other side, Amadou Sow misses a point-blank layup for the Gauchos. And then we see Creighton obviously move on. They beat Ohio. That sets up Gonzaga against Creighton in the Sweet 16. On the other situation in that bracket, we have a situation where the Pac-12 has completely, for all intents and purposes, taken over the bracket. USC makes a major statement in the round of 32 against Kansas. And I'm not just talking about the Trojans because I'm engaged to a beautiful USC alum. I'm talking about it because this is a game that I picked at the start of the tournament. And then Oregon, with its dynamic perimeter of Will Richardson, Chris Duarte, and also LJ Figueroa, sprints past Iowa and scores 95 against the Hawkeyes to get to the Sweet 16. As soon as the brackets came out, I thought this was a bad matchup for Iowa. Oregon lived up to that. But I'm going to go back to a narrative that I've been talking about all season long. And I know how much sleep I've lost over this past season, staying up late, watching the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is a conference that has great brands, that has unbelievable players, that has very good coaches. But it's a conference also that needs to improve, its national perception. It needs to improve its distribution and obviously not playing so many games against each other in competition. And you're seeing it in the NCAA tournament. Guys like Chris Duarte and Evan Mobley, and I've said this time and time again, if you took them, with all the respect to the programs that they're in, against USC, against Oregon, if you took them off those programs and put them on Duke, North Carolina, or Villanova, they'd regularly be talked about as one of the best players in the country. They're not. But now Oregon and USC will do battle in that other Sweet 16 game. Oregon obviously was ambushed and destroyed in the one regular season meeting between the two programs this season. So that sets up a Gonzaga, Creighton, USC, Oregon regional right there. I've got Gonzaga beating Creighton. I'm going to take Oregon to beat USC. And it's interesting. You look now at that area of the country, the Great Northwest. We have not seen, the Great Northwest, with the exception of Gonzaga, have a really, really good matchup in the same spot in the NCAA tournament. We were close. Remember in the 2017 Final Four, Gonzaga went to the national championship game, lost to North Carolina. The Ducks almost beat the Tar Heels in that game. Kennedy Meeks got a late offensive rebound. But I think it would be an interesting game and it would be a fascinating watch if Oregon could match up with Gonzaga in the Elite Eight. Gonzaga, again, at its best, is not like it can really be touched in this tournament. But that's the game, I think, from really an aesthetically pleasing standpoint, that I think a lot of people would love to see. We go now to the bottom left of the bracket. Michigan wins an unbelievable game over a very talented LSU team in the round of 32. LSU, again, got great performances from Javonte Smart and Cam Thomas. Michigan, though, gets a major lift from Sean D. Brown with Isaiah Livers out of the lineup. Sean D. Brown, the transfer from Wake Forest, was huge defensively. He also made big shots at 21 points. Now Michigan gets set to play Florida State in the Sweet 16. And Florida State, again, coached by Leonard Hamilton. Leonard Hamilton, who is now playing in his third straight Sweet 16. And you look at the Florida State program right now, and the only thing to do that hasn't been done yet is go to a Final Four. Let's go through the past couple years. 2018, Leonard Hamilton goes to the regional finals, loses to Michigan 58-54. 2019, Leonard Hamilton goes to the Sweet 16, loses to Gonzaga in the Sweet 16. No Phil Kofer in the lineup, no David Nichols in the lineup. And then, obviously, last year, Florida State wins the ACC regular season title, but doesn't get to play in the NCAA tournament. The only thing left for Florida State to do is go on and get to the Final Four. It's going to be very difficult for the Seminoles to do it because this region right now, with Michigan, with Florida State, and then at the bottom with UCLA and Alabama, is the region that has really stayed the tightest when you look at the matchups. Now, Alabama made mincemeat out of Maryland in the round of 32. And Alabama, with the way Javon Quinterly is playing, looks like a team that's fully capable of winning a national championship. UCLA has been, to me, one of the more interesting and surprising stories in this NCAA tournament. UCLA, remember, was a team that lost 4 straight games at the end of the regular season, and they had leads and control in the second half of all 4 games. Lost at Colorado, lost obviously on the road at Oregon, lost against USC, and also lost against Oregon State. But UCLA has gotten a big, big boost from Johnny Juzang in this NCAA tournament. Johnny Juzang, a year ago, a minimal contributor at Kentucky, now is in a situation where he is flourishing for UCLA, averaging over 22 points per game in the NCAA tournament. And now we have a situation where UCLA goes into the Sweet 16, and I know obviously the goal is to keep advancing, but I think goes into the game against Alabama as a heavy, heavy underdog. UCLA has not been a great defensive team all season long. Alabama loaded from the opening tip. So many different weapons, so many different ways to hurt the opponent. It's going to be a real interesting situation to see how that develops. I like Alabama to advance. I'm going to take Florida State to advance. I took them at the start of the tournament. But, you look right now at the potential matchups, and I see so many explosive offenses. Gonzaga, Oregon, also Alabama. Defensively on that side of the bracket, you also have a couple of teams, USC coming to mind. And in USC's win over Kansas in the round of 32, it brings up something interesting. This is the second straight time now that Kansas has been sent out of the NCAA tournament with a thorough beatdown. The same thing happened 2 years ago when the Jayhawks lost to Auburn in the round of 32, which was a dominant performance by the Auburn backcourt of Jared Harper and also Bryce Brown. So I've got Gonzaga coming out of the St. Elmo's region, which I've also renamed the Gonzaga Invitational. You rename a region twice sometimes when you're stuck obviously in a bubble in a controlled environment for 12 days. And then I'm going to take Alabama over Florida State. I think, all four of these teams in that bottom left of your region have an unbelievable situation, evolving. UCLA, obviously a great brand. Now let's go to the right side of your bracket. You have, I think, when you look at the top right of your bracket, a bracket that's been turned upside down. Now the top has held serve with Villanova and Baylor. And again, hat tip to Villanova, who did not fold when Jay Wright obviously lost Colin Gillespie for the season due to an MCL injury. And I've said this as soon as it happened. Villanova didn't need the country to throw a bake sale for it. It was doing just fine. Okay, I know it didn't have what it had with Colin Gillespie in the lineup, but it also still had enough reinforcements to get to the Sweet 16. We've seen quality minutes here out of Brian Antoine, who was a highly touted player who's battled injuries the last couple of years. I don't think Baylor obviously will be tested to the brink by Villanova. I expect Baylor to march on. And I also think this, and this is something that I thought about during the Baylor-Wisconsin game, you're seeing more and more in this tournament, and I've said this all season long, that Baylor's reserves, Adam Flagler, Matthew Meyer, if you took them off Baylor and you put them in another situation where they were featured, it would be guys who could be all Big 12 caliber players. They're just waiting their turn right now. And then at the bottom of that bracket, you have Arkansas against Oral Roberts. Arkansas back in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament for the first time in 21 years. For people not familiar with the Arkansas program, this was a program that I grew up with in the 90s that was always a perennial threat to play deep into the NCAA tournament. 1990, Final Four. 1994, national champion. 1995, national runner-up. So to see Arkansas back in the second weekend is a truly unique thing. Justin Smith, the grad transfer from Indiana, has been sensational. Also, a big thing for Eric Musselman's team has been getting Jalen Williams back, who makes as many non-scoring big plays as many people, as really anybody in the bracket. Just a really good all-around player. Now, another region that's went upside down is the bottom right. Loyola Chicago has obviously dismantled Illinois from tip to finish. They will take on an Oregon State team out of the Pac-12 that, again, and I want to point this out to people, was picked 12th in the Pac-12 preseason poll and is now one of 16 teams still playing. And then at the bottom, you have Houston against Syracuse. Now, if you're not familiar with the history of Jim Boeheim and Kelvin Sampson, let's have a little bit of an education right here. When Jim Boeheim won his only national championship in 2003, the team with Carmelo Anthony and Jerry McNamara, Syracuse played Oklahoma in the regional final in the East in Albany. Who was the head coach of Oklahoma? It was Kelvin Sampson. Syracuse won that game in dominant fashion, was never really tested, and now they will play again, Syracuse against Houston. I've got Loyola Chicago over Oregon State, and I've got Houston over Syracuse, and then I'm going to stick with Houston to get to a Final Four. I've got all Texas teams on the right side. I've got Baylor against Houston, and I've got Gonzaga against Alabama, and then I'm going to take Gonzaga and Baylor in the national championship game. So we'll see how that transpires, but first I want to obviously engage with you here from the bubble because, let's be honest, I have not had any or much, I should say, human interaction. I'm in the Indianapolis Convention Center all night till the wee hours of the morning. Okay, I've got a couple of members of my crew with me. We're all isolating. We're all staying away from people. We have went through conversations of literally every single movie that came out from 1987 to 1999. We've talked Spaceballs. We've talked Star Wars. We've talked so much Shawshank Redemption, you wouldn't believe it. I've quoted Andy Dufresne left and right because this is what happens when you don't have regular human contact. So with that note, don't at me, bro. Let's get to our questions on Twitter right now. Fire them up. Our first question comes from Joe Coyne, and it's, John, what does Villanova need to do in order to pull off the upset over Baylor? Well, I mean, you're going to need an unbelievable game out of Justin Moore, and you're also going to need an unbelievable game out of Jeremiah Robinson-Earl. Villanova doesn't have to play a perfect game to beat Baylor, but remember this, Villanova has always dictated things under Jay Wright by being in a situation where it always had elite guard play at the lead guard spot, and now Baylor has superior guard play to Villanova, especially without Colin Gillespie. Next question. Sorry, I got to respond to this text right here on the bubble. It's that time of year. Coaching changes, obviously always moving. Things happening. It's from CRK, and it's, John, how is the Big Ten the most overwhelmed every year? Does their style of play not translate to the tournament? Well, I think the one thing you need to look at is the NCAA tournament is about matchups. And the NCAA tournament is in a situation where, you know, you have to be a little bit lucky and you also have to be very, very good. And I'll give you a perfect example. Cincinnati, okay, when Mick Cronin was the coach, had a 22-point lead against Nevada 3 years ago. Nevada had an all-time comeback, won the game. All of a sudden, Nevada goes to the Sweet 16, Cincinnati's season's over. UCLA this year has an unbelievable comeback against Michigan State in the first four, wins the game in overtime. It was an unbelievable comeback, an unbelievable victory. The 6th seed then is BYU, good team, but a team from the West Coast Conference. UCLA wins the game. Then they don't get Texas, they don't get the 3 seed. But UCLA beats Abilene Christian because Abilene Christian beat Texas. Mick Cronin is no better or worse a coach than he was 3 years ago. You got to be really, really good. You also got to be a little bit lucky, but the Big Ten no doubt underperforming in this NCAA tournament. Next question. This is Danny. It says, which team remains the biggest threat to Gonzaga? Obviously, Baylor, if they meet in the national championship game. I would also say Alabama. You know, I think you have to look at teams that are really good defensively that could slow Gonzaga down a little bit. To me, that obviously fits in to teams like Alabama, like Florida State, like Baylor. Next question. I gave you 3 answers for that. It's from Cole Daniel. He goes, how well does Arkansas match up with Baylor in a potential Elite Eight game? You know, I would put Arkansas, again, at having a chance to beat Baylor and go to a Final Four. You know, I think Baylor, again, is going to have a distinct advantage at the guard spot, but Arkansas doesn't match up terrible. They're not in a situation where Baylor has a dominant big man or Baylor has, obviously, a mismatch in a certain area. Baylor's going to do what they do at the highest possible level. They're going to get great shots with Butler, with Mitchell, with Teague. Their guards are going to be better than your guards. They've got a great intangible player in Mark Vital. They've got guys by committee at the 5 with Chamwa Chachua and Flo Thamba. And, as I just said, they've got guys off the bench, Matthew Meyer, and also Adam Flagler, that could be starters. LJ Cryer belongs in that conversation too. Next question. This is from Chud Webb, and it goes, why do some people sleep during March? Chud, you know the rules, man. We sleep in May. I will not be sleeping again until May, especially if these jobs don't get filled. That's another thing. And that's all the questions for today. Now I'm going to wrap up with this. You know, I'm obviously here monitoring the NCAA tournament. We're also going to monitor all, you know, obviously the news going around to college basketball. And so much to track this year in the offseason. You're going to have players declaring for the NBA. You're going to have players transferring. Immediate eligibility is now a thing that's very, very common. We also have a couple of jobs right now open still as of today. Earlier today, George Mason hired Tennessee assistant Kim English as its next head coach. The high major jobs that are open, Indiana, DePaul, Marquette, and Utah, I would think would look to move here in the next, 7 days or so, because what's happening is when you have indecision from an administrative perspective, you then open up the opportunity for people around the players in the program to feel uncertainty. And I think we're seeing that with kids having the opportunity to exercise their rights for immediate eligibility. Guys aren't going to wait around for you to make a decision. You got to make a decision first. Indiana, I've been told, is looking at a number of candidates that potentially could have ties to the school's rich basketball tradition, maybe trying to emulate what Michigan did with Juwan Howard. DePaul and Marquette, two programs, obviously from the Big East. You would think that Loyola Chicago head coach Porter Moser would be on the short list for both of those jobs, especially with what he's done so far in this NCAA tournament. But here's the thing. If those programs want to move on a head coach and want to add a head coach right now, and you want that head coach to be Porter Moser, there's a chance 7 days from now he could be playing in the Elite Eight. And then what do? Do you wait to try and get your guy, or do you try and make a hire now to stabilize a program that could be falling apart at the seams on your respective campus? It's an interesting situation to monitor. And also, Utah is a situation to monitor as well in the Pac-12. I've seen this reported by the Salt Lake City Tribune, and I can confirm it as well. Utah Jazz assistant Alex Jensen firmly in that mix. Alex Jensen, again, was a great player on the team in '98 that went to the national championship game under Rick Majerus and obviously fell to Tubby Smith and Utah. So we've got 15 games left. 68 has become 16. I've eaten more Cobb salads in the last couple of weeks than I've eaten in my entire life, but it's all about getting, for me, to April 7th. Get to April 7th. Get to that reservation at Lilia in Brooklyn. Again, if you haven't been there, some of the best pasta in the city. Get the cacio e pepe, get the pesto, get the red sauce. All of it's good. I'm taking Gonzaga, Alabama, Baylor, and Houston to get to the Final Four. We'll be back next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. Stay positive, test negative, and remember, in the airport of life, college basketball is the Delta Sky Club.